I stared for a moment to make sure my parents were not among the 10 bodies, and then I slipped back to the back. When the young man was here, I was worried that he would notice that I had used the ancestral-seeking talisman. Now that he had left the cold storage, I didn't have to worry anymore. I walked to a place where Director Liu and the others couldn't see me and took out the ancestral-seeking talisman that I had prepared. After receiving the Dao Qi, I patted it on my body. Following my action, the ancestral-seeking talisman quickly turned into ashes. A gray aura appeared on my body and circled around me once before it flew far away and dissipated in the air. I frowned again. The ancestral-seeking talisman was the same as it had been a few days ago. It had disappeared into the distance. This proved that my parents' corpses were not nearby. After searching for a long time, I couldn't help but feel annoyed. I frowned and pondered for a while before walking in the direction of Director Liu. Coincidentally, when I walked over, the 2 young men were still moving the corpses. Director Liu seemed to have nothing to do as he strolled in my direction. I silently moved to his side and waved my hand. I used my Dao Qi to seal his nose and mouth before grabbing him and dragging him to the back of the warehouse. Because Director Liu couldn't breathe, his body continuously struggled. However, he couldn't struggle at all in my hands. He couldn't even make a sound. After dragging him far away from the empty space, I threw him down and retracted my Dao Qi from his nose and mouth. I said to him, "Director Liu, we meet again." When he heard what I said, he was stunned. He raised his head, and his expression instantly changed. He took 2 steps back and trembled as he asked, What do you want?" I coldly said, "You should know that I'm here to look for my parents' corpses. Last time, you weren't willing to help me investigate. I wonder if Director Liu has the time this time." My voice was cold. Director Liu shivered and nodded. Then he pulled a long face and said, "It's not that I don't want to help you, but the crematorium's management is too messy. They don't keep any records. I can't find anything even if I want to." Then, as he was afraid that I would misunderstand, he hurried to explain, "There are many opportunities for us to do something. That's why we don't keep any records. If we wait for a long time, we won't be able to find anything. Should I ask someone to help me search this cold storage room? The corpses here are all of the better quality that have been collected in the past month." What he said should be true. Old Wu had told me the same thing. I kept silent for a while, then shook my head. "I've checked this place. Let me ask you, where are the ashes stored in the crematorium? Also, tell me where the crematorium furnace is." Director Liu hurried to stand up and gestured to me. It was possible that the young man surnamed Wei had taken my parents' corpses the last time. He came here. After thinking about this, I was even angrier. Although my parents' corpses would be humiliated if they were sold for research purposes, as long as I could get them back, it wouldn't affect me much. However, that young man surnamed Wei had a mysterious background. If he had taken my parents' corpses, it was hard to imagine what he had experienced after that. I angrily kicked Director Liu's lower abdomen. He screamed in pain and fainted. Not only that, under the effect of my Dao energy, the nerves in his lower limbs were completely destroyed. From now on, he could only be a cripple with his lower limbs paralyzed. After punishing him, I returned to the empty space with a dark face. At this moment, the 2 young subordinates of Director Liu had just finished moving the corpses. They were looking for Director Liu. I walked over and used my Dao energy to break one of their legs. Then I walked out of the other door and found the truck parked outside. The truck was starting to move. It seemed it was about to leave this place. Moreover, I could sense that the man surnamed Wei was in the front compartment. After thinking for a while, I walked forward and carefully opened the latch at the back of the truck. Before the truck started to move, I opened the door and jumped in. If it was possible that this man surnamed Wei had taken my parents' corpses, I would go with him. I wanted to see who he was. After entering the truck, it was just as I had expected. There were no guards inside. There were only 2 rows of corpses. I wanted to find a place to sit, but when I lifted my head to take a look, I was stunned. No matter what I had seen with my own eyes, or what Director Liu had told me, this man surnamed Wei had taken 10 corpses. However, there were 11 corpses in the truck. How could there be one more? Chapter 178. There were no lights in the truck. After we closed the door, it was completely dark. However, with the help of my Tao energy, the darkness didn't affect me. I took a quick glance and found that one of the corpses looked strange. The 10 corpses I had just brought out were all wrapped in body bags. However, in this pile of corpses, there was one that wasn't wrapped in a body bag. It was wearing clothes. Did this Mr. Wei go to another place to search for corpses before coming to the crematorium? As soon as this thought popped up in my head, I immediately denied it. This corpse was different from the other corpses. It was purplish black and shriveled. It didn't look like a person who had just died. Moreover, the Yin energy on this corpse was much thicker than that of ordinary corpses. I studied it for a long time, but couldn't find anything. I walked forward and lowered my head to check. However, as soon as I got close to the corpse, it suddenly jolted up from the ground. This sudden change startled me. I hurriedly retreated. Instinctively, I used the square sky fan on my body to defend myself. I thought that my action was unnecessary. However, the dried corpse was really fast. After it stood up, it dashed toward me. In just a blink of an eye, it was in front of my face. Even with my speed, I didn't have time to react. Fortunately, I had the square sky fan. The wild grass on the lonely grave appeared and blocked the dried corpse, making it spin in circles. Otherwise, the dried corpse would have jumped on me. No matter how strong I was, I wouldn't have had a chance to use it. In the end, geomancy masters were only good at using Taoist techniques. Their bodies were still weak. Although they could use Taoist energy instantly, it didn't have much power. It was effective against ordinary people, but it wasn't enough to deal with this dried corpse. I felt lucky and wiped my sweat. However, before I could put my hand down, I lifted my head to look at the dried corpse. I was bewildered. Just now, I had thought that it was just a dried corpse with thick Yin energy. Now, after it stood up, the Yin energy it exuded was shockingly massive. It was almost as strong as my Tao energy. This was a zombie whose cultivation was comparable to the middle stage of the acupuncture point realm. In the world of metaphysics, there have always been sects that raise corpses. The people in these sects are almost the same as the people from the ghost-raising sect that I met before. It's just that one raises ghosts and the other raises corpses. Both sects are considered evil by the world of metaphysics. Of course, even though it was said to be an evil path, it wasn't that contradictory. It was just like the last time when I was being examined by the Metaphysics Association. When I said that I was raising a ghost, the others looked at me with disdain. The metaphysics world only looked at these evil paths with disdain. They felt that if they didn't walk the right path, they wouldn't be able to obtain the right results. Therefore, I am not surprised that a member of the corpse nurturing sect suddenly appeared. However, it is said that the members of these sects are struggling at death's door in some borderlands, just like the ghost nurturing sect's headquarters in Hong Kong. When did the corpse nurturing sect come to our Central Plains? Even though I was puzzled, this wasn't the time to think about it. As I channeled my Tao energy into the square heaven fan, I conjured the earth-overturning seal with both hands. Although the earth-overturning seal was specialized in suppressing ghosts, zombies and ghosts both belong to the Een attribute. It was quite useful against zombies. With the completion of the last movement of my hands, the Tao Qi changed and finally condensed into a mysterious pattern. It slowly separated from my hands and formed a huge Tao Qi light seal on my fingertips. It soared into the sky and directly smashed towards the zombie. When I first used the earth-overturning seal, it consumed a lot of Tao energy. However, now that I have a 5-apertured cultivation base, the Tao energy consumed by the earth-overturning seal was nothing to me. Even if I were to use the square heaven fan and the earth-overturning seal at the same time, I could still withstand it. The speed of the earth-overturning seal was extremely fast. Almost at the same time that it left my hands, it suddenly appeared below the zombie's head and smashed down. As the zombie was trapped outside the lonely grave, it was already impatient. When it saw the earth-overturning seal in the sky, it roared and clenched its right arm into a fist, smashing towards the earth-overturning seal. With a bang sound, the two collided fiercely. The earth-overturning seal, which was formed by pure Taoist Qi, was shattered by the zombie in an instant. However, the earth-overturning seal was able to fight against the existence of a ghost king, like Jing Gui. Although the zombie was not pure Een, and the effect of the earth-overturning seal might be slightly weaker, it was not something that the zombie could easily defeat. At the same time that the earth-overturning seal collapsed, the zombie's right arm almost completely collapsed. The dried flesh exploded like pieces of rocks, even creating small holes in the metal walls around the truck. The earth-overturning seal had replaced one of the zombie's arms, but it had also stimulated its ferocious nature. After the arm collapsed, it roared angrily and continued to rush forward. Although the square heaven fan's lonely grave painting could temporarily block it, the Tao energy in my body was flowing faster and faster. I sneered and immediately chanted another mysterious incantation. At the same time, I made another hand seal. This time, I used the pure Yang divine incantation, which was as famous as the divine golden light incantation. It was one of the 8 great divine incantations of Taoism. The difference between the divine golden light incantation and the divine golden light incantation was that the pure Yang divine incantation was an offensive divine incantation. When combined with the pure Yang hand seal, it could condense the pure Yang karmic fire, which was extremely destructive to all Een and evil beings. Due to its extraordinary power, this divine incantation could only be used when one reached the middle stage of the pressure point technique. Speaking of which, this was the first time I had used it. After 2 simple hand seals, the first ray of pure Yang golden light suddenly appeared from the gaps between my index and middle fingers. As I continued to make hand seals, pure Yang golden light continuously appeared from the gaps between my other fingers. When I was done, the golden light gathered on the tip of my middle finger, forming a small candle flame. The candle flame looked very fleeting, as though it could be extinguished by a gust of wind. However, according to the records in the death scripture, this candle flame was the pure Yang karmic fire, which was condensed from pure Yang energy. It contained an extremely terrifying temperature that could suppress all Een and evil beings. After the pure Yang karmic fire was formed, I didn't hesitate and directly threw the candle flame forward. The small candle flame was like a Kongming lantern on a summer night, fluttering as it flew toward the zombie. At the same time, the zombie seemed to have instinctively felt the power of the pure Yang karmic fire. Its originally angry expression instantly changed, and its withered, purplish-black face revealed fear. It turned around and hurriedly tried to escape. However, right at this moment, the weeds next to the grave suddenly grew crazily. In just a blink of an eye, The weeds had reached the zombie's feet and tightly bound them to the ground. The zombie fiercely jumped up and tried to break the weeds. However, the withered and thin weeds were terrifyingly tough. As soon as one of the weeds was broken, new weeds immediately grew to replace it. Even the most ordinary corpse was extremely strong. Not to mention this zombie, whose cultivation base was comparable to the middle stage of the pressure point technique. Even a heavenly master wouldn't be able to defeat it in terms of strength. However, this seemingly ordinary weeds had completely restrained the zombie, rendering it unable to move. This scene was beyond my expectations. Previously, I didn't know that the square sky fan had such an effect. I guessed that it was a new ability that appeared after I reached the middle stage of the pressure point technique. After its legs were tied up, the zombie had no way to escape. The drifting, pure, young karmic fire slowly arrived in front of it and finally landed on its shoulder. The golden light divine incantation had been able to resist the Ghost King's attack for a few seconds. Chapter 179. I stood in the carriage and didn't move. Although I had originally planned to secretly follow him, now that I had been exposed, I didn't need to conceal myself anymore. I stood there as I converted the pure, yang karmic fire into Tao Qi and absorbed it into my body. At the same time, I waited for the young man with the surname Wei to come over. I had dealt with the middle stage zombie, so I didn't need to worry about this corpse breeder at the early stage. However, to my surprise, after the carriage stopped, the Tao energy from the young man surnamed Wei didn't move closer to me. Quite the contrary, it moved further away from me. I was a little dumbfounded. That fellow was decisive. As soon as he found that something was wrong, he didn't even try to fight me. He just turned around and ran. It was rare to see such a despicable person in the metaphysics world. This time, I didn't have time to absorb the pure yang karmic fire. I kicked the door open and chased after that man. As for the whereabouts of my parents' remains, I would have to rely on this person to uncover the mystery. Moreover, I had killed this person's zombie. Who knew if he would come to take revenge? After experiencing Lu Xinyang's matter, I had developed a cautious personality. I decisively made a quick hand seal and jumped out of the carriage. I ran as fast as I could. My cultivation base was much higher than his, so I thought I could catch up with him. However, half a minute later, I gawked. That man's speed was frighteningly fast. When I jumped out of the carriage, he was only a few dozen meters away from me. However, I had been chasing him for more than a minute. Not only had I not shortened the distance between us, but I had also fallen further behind. That corpse breeder must have some secret technique to increase his speed. Otherwise, with his cultivation base, he couldn't be faster than me. While I was at my wit's end, Tong Tong's voice arose in my mind. "Brother, I'll help you chase after him." I was bewildered. Tong Tong's body had recovered that fast. Before I could ask, Tong Tong turned into a jet of black energy and flew out of the jade bracelet. She directly chased after the corpse breeder. Her speed astonished me. I couldn't even see the black aura that she had transformed into. I turned into a black ray of light and shot out like lightning. It only took a few seconds to cover a distance of 100 meters. She had actually caught up to me. After she came to a stop, she reverted to her original form. She raised her hands slightly, and two thin streams of snake-like black chi surged forth from the tips of her middle fingers. Like two black chains, they shot toward the corpse breeder with the surname Wei. The corpse breeder wanted to dodge and run. However, the speed of the black energy was just as fast as Tong Tong had shown. Before the corpse breeder could react, the black energy had already coiled around his ankles. Seeing that there was no hope of escape, the corpse breeder stopped moving. he suddenly took out a black, skull-like object from his hands and threw it into the air. At the same time, he spat a mouthful of blood on the withered skull. After being stained with blood, the skull suddenly burst out with a blood-red glow and directly exploded in front of Tong Tong. My heart tightened. I was worried that something bad would happen to Tong Tong. I quickened my pace and dashed toward her. At this moment, Tong Tong waved her hand, and a thin black light curtain appeared in front of her to block the skull's explosion. Then, the black threads between her middle fingers moved faster. In just a blink of an eye, they extended from the corpse breeder's feet to his body. Not only did they bind his body, but they also bound his hands. When I arrived, the corpse breeder was tied up like a rice dumpling. He was lying on the ground, his face full of humiliation. I was overjoyed. Spirits and zombies, when compared to people of the same level in the metaphysics world, were actually slightly inferior. This was because they could only rely on their natural talents and didn't have any divine powers. Humans, on the other hand, had too many divine powers that they could use. For example, the pure yang fire that I had just used. Not to mention a zombie of the same level as me, I was confident that I could fight against a zombie at the peak of the pressure point realm or even at the glory of consciousness realm. Therefore, although Tong Tong's realm was higher than the corpse breeder's, I was still a little worried. However, I didn't expect that Tong Tong would be able to deal with him so easily. I stopped and squatted down. Just as I was about to interrogate him, he asked with an unconvinced expression, "Fellow Taoist, you have a good plan. First, you attacked my corpse puppet, then you attacked me. Humph! Since when did the ghost breeder sect have the guts to attack a disciple of the corpse sect?" I was surprised. Then I understood that it was because of Tong Tong that he thought I was a member of the ghost breeder sect. However, what is this corpse sect he mentioned? Is that the name of their corpse breeder sect? My heart became heavy. I had considered this problem before. If the corpse breeder was the only one selling corpses, then it wouldn't be difficult to find my parents' remains. However, if this person represented a sect, then it would be hard to say. The difficulty of finding my parents' remains would increase by several levels. A corpse breeder at the early stage of the acupoint sealing realm sure talks big. Even if you and your corpse puppet are together, what can you do? As I spoke, I gathered my Tao energy and revealed my middle stage acupoint sealing realm cultivation. The corpse breeder, surnamed Wei, finally shut his mouth and didn't say anything else. At the same time, it was also the pass of the Great Wall, the Nyangzi Pass. After they arrived, the corpse breeder drove off the national highway and arrived at a dirt road with many twists and turns. After another half hour of bumpy driving, we finally stopped in front of a steep mountain wall. The corpse breeder slowly got out of the carriage and pointed at the mountain wall in front of us. He said, "There is a small path behind this mountain wall. We must follow this path. Once we climb over this mountain, we will arrive at the corpse sect's headquarters. Can you remove the restrictions on my body now?" I didn't answer him and just looked at the mountain in front of us. At the same time, I used my Tao energy to sense it. It seemed he was right. The mountain was Yang, and the forest was Yin. The mountain in front of us looked barren, which was the pattern of solitary Yang. It should have a lot of Yang energy, but just by standing at the foot of the mountain, I could feel a strong Yin energy fluctuation. This proved that there was something strange on this mountain or behind it. I had read in a history textbook that there were several ancient trade routes in Taihang Mountain. They were hidden in the middle of several mountain ranges. Later, in different dynasties, many bandits and robbers gathered here, and it was impossible to eliminate them all, just like the 10,000 mountains in Shaanxi. This place was also a famous bandit lair in history. I guessed that behind this steep mountain wall was one of these ancient trade routes. This kind of special terrain could provide a place for secluded sects to live. Moreover, it was a place that was secretive enough to ensure that no one knew about them. With that thought in mind, I guessed that the corpse breeder wasn't lying. The mountain road is rugged. I'm afraid it won't be easy to carry the 10 corpses in the carriage up the mountain. Brother Wei, how did you carry the corpses up the mountain? After observing the terrain, I asked the corpse breeder with a smile. The corpse breeder's face turned cold. He looked at me with more resentment. After a long time, he took a deep breath and answered, "Corpse puppets are very strong. When we used to climb the mountain, we had to rely on them to carry the corpses. This time, my corpse puppet died in your hands. We have to rely on ourselves to carry the corpses." I could see that the corpse puppet was very important to this corpse breeder. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such a big grudge against me. However, it made sense. This corpse breeder was at the early stage of the acupoint sealing realm, while the corpse puppet was at the middle stage of the acupoint sealing realm. That corpse puppet should be his biggest trump card. Then, before I could answer, the corpse breeder said, "All right, you should remove my restriction. We'll have to exert our strength. Each of us will be responsible for 5 corpses. Let's go up the mountain." I still didn't answer him. Chapter 181. After the corpse breeder's body softened and collapsed, I quickly retrieved the pure, yang karmic fire back into my body and used my Tao Qi to nourish it. Then I formed a soul-searching seal and prepared to search his soul. This is what I calculated from the beginning. The corpse sect is a hidden sect. For this kind of sect, the location of the sect must be very hidden. Even the souls of the people in the sect are likely to have restrictions placed on them. Therefore, killing them and searching their souls won't guarantee that I can find the corpse sect. That was why I deliberately pretended to be polite to this corpse breeder, making him believe that I had something to ask of him and take the initiative to bring me here. From the very beginning, I could feel that this corpse breeder didn't know much about the ways of the world. He had been immersed in cultivation since he was a child and didn't have much contact with people. After I probed him, I found that he was indeed like that. After discovering that I had something to ask of him, he immediately agreed. Moreover, from time to time, he revealed a mocking smile. I guessed that he was planning to find someone to deal with me after arriving at the corpse sect. Unfortunately, this fellow's thoughts were too simple. He only wanted to scheme against me, but he didn't expect that I would use his scheming mind to achieve my own goal. Now that I had found the corpse sect, I didn't have to worry about killing someone and searching their soul. It would be good if I could find some valuable clues. Even if I couldn't, it wouldn't affect anything. Not long after, the soul-searching seal was formed in my hand, and I directly pressed it on the corpse breeder's body. This was the first time I had used the soul-searching seal. After I pressed my hand on the corpse, my Tao Qi turned into a gray mist that was similar to Yin Qi. However, it was different. Even with my current cultivation base, I couldn't completely understand it. In short, the gray fog instantly enveloped the corpse breeder's entire body, then directly penetrated his body surface and immersed into his 3 souls. Around 3 minutes later, the gray mist suddenly rushed out of his body. This time, the color of the mist became darker and returned to my body at a faster speed. Then, fragments of memories crazily surged into my brain. I felt like I was watching a movie. I could vaguely see many scenes of the corpse breeder's life. From when he was young, his father took him to touch the first corpse. Then, he started to practice the sound testing technique. Then, he started to refine his own corpse puppet. All kinds of experiences were scattered in front of me. However, just as I had guessed, there were many things in his memory that were clearly restricted. They looked very vague. and I couldn't see them clearly. This included the location of the corpse sect. Fortunately, I thought too much and didn't kill him to search his soul. Otherwise, this clue would have been broken. However, aside from the location of the sect and the specific situation within the sect, I saw many other things in the corpse sect, including the corpse sect's cultivation method. At first, I didn't think that there was anything special about this evil method of raising corpses. However, after a quick glance, I was startled. The disciples of the corpse sect only had one chance to refine a corpse in their lifetime, and they could only refine one corpse. This was the corpse puppet that the corpse cultivator was talking about. Once a corpse cultivator successfully refined a corpse puppet, it would never change for the rest of its life, even if the corpse puppet died. No wonder this corpse breeder, with the surname Wei, harbored such deep hatred towards me. I could feel it from the start. Judging from this cultivation method, killing his corpse puppet was equivalent to destroying the foundation of his cultivation for the rest of his life. Moreover, the reason he was able to boast shamelessly after being controlled by me was because he had confidence in the corpse sect. On the other hand, after the corpse puppet's death, he also had the thought of dying. As for why the corpse sect's cultivation method surprised me, it was because I saw a legend about the corpse sect in the corpse cultivator surnamed Wei's memory. Although I had never heard of the corpse sect, it had a very long history. According to the legend, several hundred years ago, a dragon-seeking realm disciple of the corpse sect had a heavenly master corpse puppet by his side. In the cultivation of the corpse sect, one's own strength was one aspect, and the strength of the corpse puppet was another. One's own strength could only be slowly increased, but the corpse puppet could reach the heavens in a single bound. Although Tong Tong's cultivation was higher than mine, she was willing to stay by my side, so I couldn't control her. In fact, it was almost impossible for someone with a lower cultivation to control an otherworldly item with a higher cultivation. Just like when the Jing ghost was trapped by Tong Tong in the jade bracelet, I didn't even think about borrowing her power because I knew I couldn't control it, unless I also reached the glorious knowledge realm. But to be honest, once I reached that realm, the Jing ghost wouldn't have much meaning to me. It would be of little value. However, the corpse sect wasn't like this. Their cultivation method was extremely overbearing. The corpse cultivator had complete control over the corpse puppet. Even after the refinement was successful, as long as the corpse puppet was a certain distance away from the corpse cultivator, it would lose all ability to move. With this kind of terrifying control, the corpse puppet's ability could be said to be the corpse cultivator's own ability. That was why that dragon-seeking realm corpse cultivator used his own corpse puppet to become the youngest elder in the history of the corpse sect. This made countless young corpse keepers envious. All of them dreamed that they could find such a corpse puppet. This included the corpse keeper surnamed Wei, whom I had searched his soul. Of course, it was almost impossible to find a corpse puppet at the heavenly master realm. However, the magical aspect of this cultivation method lay in another aspect. A person's talent was limited, and it was almost predetermined when they were born. It was very difficult to change, and the corpse puppet was a turning point. As long as one could find a corpse with excellent quality, even a mediocre corpse cultivator could use his corpse puppet to reach a position equal to a heavenly master. This was a chance to choose again. For those with mediocre talent, this cultivation method was simply a gift from the heavens. Of course, there were very few corpses with excellent talent, and finding one depended on luck. This was probably what the Book of Changes referred to as Dian's number one. I was also very interested in this cultivation method. Fortunately, although part of the cultivation method was hidden in the memories of the corpse cultivator surnamed Wei, the most basic things were still there. That was why I wasn't in a hurry to go to the cave near the water source after reading the corpse cultivator surnamed Wei's life. Instead, I sat there and slowly studied the cultivation method of the corpse sect. I could see that the cultivation method was divided into three parts. One was the Yin refining technique, the second was the corpse puppet technique, and the last was the corpse controlling technique. The Yin refining technique was actually the cultivation of Taoist energy. However, not much of the corpse sect's Taoist energy had been transformed into Yin energy. That was why it was called the Yin refining technique. It was useless to me, so I directly threw it aside. As for the corpse puppet technique, it was a method to refine corpses into corpse puppets. I was very interested in it, so I immersed myself in studying it. After reading it, I was even more shocked. The death scripture had recorded that among the 3 souls and 7 spirits, the 3 souls were good while the 7 spirits were evil. Monsters like zombies were controlled by the 7 spirits. That was why the corpse sect's corpse puppet refining technique was also a sacrificial formation that could be used to refine the 7 spirits. However, it was easy to sense the 3 souls, but the 7 spirits were illusory. With my current realm, I couldn't touch the 7 spirits. The consensus in the metaphysics world was that one could only study the 7 spirits after reaching the heavenly master realm. However, the corpse sect's corpse puppet refining technique could only be studied after reaching the earth master realm, which was the dragon-seeking realm. It was incredible. After studying it for a long time, although I had learned the refining technique, I couldn't understand the principles behind it. It was too profound. Then I turned my eyes to the third part, the corpse controlling technique. This part was much simpler and didn't involve the 7 spirits. It only recorded how to command zombies to fight and how to train them to increase their strength. It looked very ordinary. Such an ordinary technique was able to control a corpse puppet whose cultivation was much higher than his. The reason for this should be that the method of refining the corpse puppet was too exquisite. By the time I finished studying the 3 parts, most of the night had passed. I looked at the cave near the water source in the distance and began to think about how to sneak in. My initial plan was to impersonate this Wei Sampung. From his memories, I knew that this boy was a lonely person. His parents died early, and he didn't have many friends in the corpse sect. Moreover, his body was very similar to mine. Most of the people in the corpse sect had Yin energy covering their faces. As long as I was careful, it was possible to sneak in. However, the only problem was that the people of the corpse sect all had corpse puppets. Moreover, whether it was in daily life or during cultivation, corpse puppets were inseparable. If I wanted to impersonate this Wei Sampung, I would have to make a corpse puppet. But where could I get a corpse puppet now? I frowned and looked at Wei Sampung's corpse in front of me. An idea popped up in my mind. Since I had already obtained the corpse puppet refining technique, should I directly refine Wei Sampung into my own corpse puppet? Chapter 182. After thinking about it, I was a little tempted. Although Orthodox Taoists despised the corpse-raising sect, it didn't matter to me. As long as it could increase my strength, I could accept it. As for good and evil, cultivation was just a method, and good and evil were actions. There was no necessary connection between the two. Tong Tong was a good example. Although she was a ghost, she was much kinder than most people. Vice President Su of the Shenzhen Metaphysics Society and Professor Deng, whom I had met at school, looked dignified, but what were they really like? The boundary between a human and a ghost couldn't be measured by these things. Next, I began to use the corpse puppet refining technique to slowly deal with the corpse. According to the corpse refining technique, to refine a corpse puppet, I had to first clean up the 3 souls of the corpse and turn it into a soulless corpse. Then I had to use Yin energy to nourish the corpse. After the Yin energy had completely soaked the corpse, I had to carve the refining formation on the corpse. After these 3 steps, after a certain period of time, when the corpse stood up, the corpse puppet would be refined. The first two steps were simple, but the last step was the most important. Moreover, it was difficult to control the time. The time needed for the corpse to wake up was related to the innate talent of the corpse. Generally speaking, corpses that woke up within 7 days couldn't have the innate talent of a heavenly master. Only corpses that woke up after 7 days had the chance to become a heavenly master. Although Wei Somping's innate talent was good, it was impossible for him to become a heavenly master. Thus, it wouldn't take too long. Originally, I wanted to refine him into a corpse puppet, but after cleaning up his 3 souls, I became hesitant. On one hand, Wei Samping had a mission this time, and he came back with so many corpses. I had to report on time. I could explain it 1 or 2 days later, but if I was too late, I was afraid that the people of the corpse insect would punish me, and I would be exposed. On the other hand, I could only refine 1 corpse puppet. If I turned Wei Samping into a corpse puppet now, wouldn't I be wasting such a good opportunity to refine a corpse? A corpse puppet's power was great, which could be seen from Tong Tong's body. Previously, when I encountered the ghost King Jingui, I would have died without a burial place if I were alone. However, with Tong Tong and I working together, we were able to deal with the Jingui. If there was a corpse puppet that was as strong as Tong Tong, that Jingui wouldn't have been able to do anything to me. With that thought in mind, I was at a loss. If I didn't refine corpse puppets, I wouldn't be able to join the corpse insect. If I did, I would waste such a good opportunity. After a few minutes, I sighed. Finding my parents' corpses was more important. If I wasted this chance, I wouldn't mind wasting it. After making up my mind, I activated the Tao energy in my body and forced my blood out of my fingertips. I was going to use my blood to carve the formation to refine a corpse puppet on Wei Samping's body. However, at that moment, Tong Tong's voice suddenly sounded in my head. She asked me why I sighed. While I was drawing the formation, I told Tong Tong the reason behind it. After Tong Tong heard this, it suddenly came out of the jade bracelet. When she had captured Wei Samping, her body hadn't fully recovered. She looked a little weak. However, after staring at Wei Samping's corpse for a while, she smiled and said to me, "Brother, you don't need to refine him into a corpse puppet." I was surprised and asked, "What do you mean?" Tong Tong gestured with her hand and said, "After dealing with his corpse, it will look like a corpse puppet. Now, we just need to control it." I nodded. Tong Tong was right. Among the 3 steps of refining a corpse puppet, the first 2 were dealing with the corpse, and the last one was controlling it. Now that I had completed the first 2 steps, only the last one was left. It's fine as long as we can control it. However, the most important thing right now is to refine it into a corpse puppet. Only then can I control it and not let the people of the corpsine sect discover anything. After I said that, Tong Tong smiled even more happily. She pointed her chubby finger at herself and said, "Brother, you can't control it, but Tong Tong can. Zombies also have yin energy, and my heavenly yin energy can control them. I can even attach my heavenly yin energy to the zombie's body to fight with others. When the time comes, you just need to tell me what you wanted to do." After Tong Tong said that, my eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, Tong Tong was a heavenly embryo, and her strength was far greater than Wei Samping's when he was alive. Controlling his corpse wouldn't be a problem. This way, I could get the best of both worlds and solve my problem. I hugged Tong Tong and kissed her. Then I happily said, "Tong Tong, you're amazing. You've helped me solve my problem." At this time, Tong Tong suddenly became shy. She lowered her head and stamped her foot. Then she angrily said, "Brother, how can you kiss me? I'm ignoring you." Then her body flashed and disappeared from my sight. She returned to the jade bracelet. However, at the moment she disappeared, Wei Somping's corpse suddenly stood up from the ground. He reached out his hand and pinched me. At the same time, I could see a trace of reproach on his dark face. This gave me a fright. His pupils' control over zombies wasn't any less than that of the corpse insects people. However, the zombies' movements were a little scary, and it made my hair stand on end, making me feel very uncomfortable. Fortunately, Tong Tong wasn't stubborn. After pinching me, she didn't do anything else. However, her voice was still a little angry as she asked me what to do next. I asked her to control the zombie and carry the 10 corpses on the ground. "Can you do it?" Tong Tong didn't answer me. She directly commanded the zombie to carry the corpses on the ground. Then she jumped twice at me, indicating that it was a piece of cake. Tong Tong's personality was much more cheerful than before. I smiled and praised her. Then I took off all of Wei Somping's clothes and swapped with mine. Then I asked Tong Tong to command the zombie to obediently follow behind me. We walked to the cave with the water source. At this time, everything was ready. I could use Yin energy to cover my face. At the same time, I used the dark green energy to cover my Tao energy to the early stage of the acupoint sealing realm. Tong Tong could also use her heavenly Yin energy to make Wei Somping's corpse show the aura of the middle stage of the acupoint sealing realm. At that time, even if we met people of the corpse insect in the glory of knowledge realm, as long as they didn't check too carefully, they wouldn't find anything wrong. Of course, if we met people in the heavenly master realm, it would be a different story. The entrance to the cave didn't look far from us, but we had to walk for around 3 hours before we reached it. When I stood outside the cave, I could see that the river flowing out of the cave was extremely wide. It filled the entire entrance of the cave and extended to both sides. The river was even wider than the entrance of the cave. In this way, there was no path to enter or exit the cave. We could only rely on the boat. I was a little skeptical. According to Wei Somping's memory, every time we passed through this place, someone would come and pick us up. However, I had been standing here for a long time. How come I didn't see anything? Well, I was thinking, I heard an old man's voice. "Kid from the Wei family, the time to hand over the corpses is today. It's the hour of the morning. If you miss the time, aren't you afraid of being punished by the masters in the corpse storage hall?" I jumped in fright and hastily turned my head to look. I saw a skinny old man standing next to me with an oar. His pair of dim yellow eyes were staring at me. I recognized that this old man was only at the late stage of the dragon-seeking realm. He hadn't even broken through to the pressure point realm. However, I didn't know if it was an illusion, but I felt a threatening aura from his body. Wei Sampung was an introverted person, but at the same time, he was a little arrogant. I dodged his gaze and stiffly replied, "I naturally understand." "Ha!" The skinny old man smiled and waved his hand to the side. Suddenly, a small boat appeared on the seemingly empty surface of the river. When he jumped onto the boat, he forced a smile and said, "If it wasn't because I had some friendship with your father in the past, this old man wouldn't have bothered to remind you. All right, quickly come up. The one on duty today is Lord, who of the corpse storage hall. You should think carefully about how to deal with him." I gloomily nodded and jumped onto the boat. Wei Somping's corpse also jumped onto the boat under Tong Tong's command. The small boat looked very unstable, but even with so many corpses on board, the boat still steadily floated without the slightest danger of capsizing. After we were seated, the skinny old man swung the oar in his hand, and the boat quickly moved towards the cave. After entering the cave, I looked around for a long time and was immediately astonished. This karst cave extended in all directions and had countless branches. Each branch was connected to a slightly smaller cave, and from these slightly smaller caves, countless more branches extended out. As the cycle continued, it was likely that the entire underground of the Taihang Mountains was filled with these large and small caves. Chapter 184. After opening my eyes, I looked around. The narrow soul-devouring cave was still the same as before. I didn't see anything strange. Then I used my Tao energy to check, but I didn't find anything either. I frowned and asked Tong Tong, "What's going on?" Tong Tong came out of the jade bracelet and pointed at the innermost part of the cave. "There's something there." My eyes immediately focused on that spot, but after staring for a long time, I still didn't find anything strange. I asked Tong Tong what it was. She frowned and hesitated for a while. "I don't know, but I can show it to you." She raised her hands, and a black light curtain appeared out of thin air. Then she swept it in that direction. Right at this moment, I heard a sound in the air. When Tong Tong's black light curtain swept over, a faint shadow appeared out of thin air. Sure enough, there's something there. When I saw the phantom, my first thought was that it was a ghost similar to Tong Tong. However, I immediately rejected this idea. Yin souls were all Yin, and this soul-devouring cave was densely covered in Yin energy, not to mention Yin souls. Even the disciples of the corpse sect would suffer from the pain of having their souls devoured just because of the heavy Yin energy on their bodies. How could ordinary Yin souls endure it? Of course, Tong Tong was an exception. She was a heavenly embryo and was born with 3 souls. She wasn't afraid of Yang energy, so she wasn't affected at all. Could it be that this shadow was also a heavenly embryo? That was impossible. Not to mention anything else. Just looking at his illusory body, I knew he couldn't be a heavenly embryo. No matter how weak a heavenly embryo was, its body was much more solid than an ordinary Yin soul. Then I used my Tao energy to sense it. I was even more certain that it wasn't a heavenly embryo because this shadow didn't have any Yin energy fluctuations. Instead, it was shrouded in Yang energy, just like me. I carefully looked at the old man's illusory face, and a word popped up in my head. Tao ghost. That was the only possibility. After death, the Tao energy didn't scatter and fused with the 3 souls. His body was shrouded in Yang energy. Apart from that, I couldn't think of any other possibilities. However, I didn't know what a Tao ghost looked like. It was very rare and rarely circulated in the world. As for the one on my arm, it's a Tao ghost seal that I've already made. I'm not sure if the other Tao ghosts look the same. Just as I was about to say something, the old man spoke first. He looked at Tong Tong with an admiring expression and asked, "Little girl, could it be that you're a heavenly child?" My gaze instantly froze. This old man actually recognized Tong Tong's identity right away. Although the birth was strange, it was impossible to tell it from the outside. The heaven teacher's soul. The 2 words, Yang spirit, immediately appeared in my mind. Yin souls had different levels, just like pupils. At this moment, the Ghost Marshal's power was close to that of the Ghost King, and above the Ghost King was the Yin spirit. The Yin spirit's power was roughly equivalent to the Heaven Teacher realm. Ordinary Yin souls could reach this realm after cultivating. If a Heaven Teacher died, and his soul turned into a Yin soul, then he would have the Yin spirit cultivation base. The opposite of Yin spirit was the Yang spirit. The Yang spirit was also formed from 3 souls, but it wasn't a Yin soul. After one's cultivation base reached the Heaven Teacher realm, the 3 souls and the soul would break free from the shackles of the body and form something similar to a primordial spirit. In fact, I didn't really understand this realm. I had only read about it in the death scripture, so I could only understand it to this point. I silently looked at the old man's illusory face and asked, "Since you're a Yang spirit of the corpse sect, why did you lose your body and power and hide in this soul-devouring cave?" The old man's illusory face seemed to be startled and blurted out, "You know about the Yang spirit?" The Yang spirit was indeed very mysterious and only circulated in the circle of heaven teachers. For a feng shui master at the acupuncture point realm, like me, it was too far away. It was normal for him to be surprised. I nodded and said, "I've only heard a little about it." The old man's illusory face wryly smiled and sighed. "Little friend, you have some knowledge. However, this question is a long story. Moreover, it involves a big secret of the corpse sect. It's not good to tell you right now." Big secret? I wasn't interested in the secret of the corpse sect, so I didn't continue to ask. I just nodded and asked again, "May I know why Senior has come to find me?" The old man's illusory face sighed again and continued, "It was because of that secret that I became the target of the corpse sect. After my young spirit left my body was destroyed. In the end, I had to rely on a cultivation technique that I learned from a mysterious sect in my early years to escape to this place. I relied on the abundant yang qi to barely survive. Until now, the corpse sect is still tracking the whereabouts of my yang spirit, so I don't dare to take a step out of the soul-devouring cave." After he finished speaking, he looked at me with a burning gaze and said, "Over the years, it's not that no one has entered the soul-devouring cave, but they were all corpse sect disciples. This old man thought that there was no hope for me to escape, but I never thought that I would meet you here today." As soon as he finished speaking, I understood that he wanted me to help him escape. I hesitated for a moment, then shook my head and said, "I have something else to do here, and it's very dangerous." Chapter 185. A Great Fortune? I faintly smiled. This kind of empty promise didn't attract me, but I was still a little happy. The Celestial Master's sun god was very mysterious. The death scripture had briefly mentioned that the sun god had great power. However, the old man said that he had lost his physical body and power, and that he didn't have any power. These two completely different statements made me not know which one to believe. Thus, my previous refusal was more or less a test. No matter what, the illusory old man, Yen Nantian, had been hiding here all this time, struggling at death's door. So, he definitely wanted to leave. If he still had the strength, and I didn't agree, he would definitely attack me. But now, not only did he not attack me, he even begged me. My heart calmed down. This sun god really had lost his power. We were strangers that met by chance, so it was impossible for me to trust a celestial master's sun god. However, if this celestial master's sun god didn't have any power, then there was no harm in trusting him. Although I had searched Wei Samping's soul, I knew too little about the corpse sect. With the help of this celestial master's sun god, it would definitely save me a lot of trouble. With this thought, I nodded and agreed. Yen Nantian was overjoyed. He even cupped his hands in front of me and solemnly said, "Little friend, thank you for your help. If I can smoothly escape this time, I will return and restore my body. I will definitely reward you generously." I didn't care about the reward, but I was surprised when he said that he would restore his body. I quickly asked, "After the body is destroyed, can it be restored?" "Naturally, it can't be restored." Yen Nantian smiled and said, "However, the corpse sect has a secret technique that can reconstruct the body." Reconstructing the body? I had only heard of Taoist master Tai Yi in the legends. He used lotus roots as bones and lotus leaves as muscles to reconstruct Neza's body. Could it be that the power of the celestial master realm could reach the level of legends? I was stunned for a long time. After asking Yen Nantian, he shook his head with a strange expression and said, "Of course it's not that magical. The so-called reconstructing the body is nothing more than finding another body." Find another body? My expression turned cold. Could it be that you are talking about taking over another body? It was rumored that after some mountain spirits cultivated to the Een spirit realm, their souls could leave their bodies and search for humans. After devouring the human's 3 souls, they could live in the human's body and control the human's body. It was called transfiguration. It meant that they had already taken human form, and from then on, they would start to consider themselves as humans. This was possession. As for why the Heavens Teacher corpse puppets were willing to follow the dragon-seeking realm corpse puppets, it was because of what Yen Nantian said about possession. In the corpse sect, the corpse puppets of the disciples were all in the corpse storage hall and were chosen by the corpses themselves. Among them, there were some corpses that were found from all over the country, like Wei Sampeng. These were the most common corpses that were given to the most common disciples. As for the truly powerful corpses, they were all bestowed by the sect. For example, the corpse puppets of the dragon-seeking realm cultivator with the Heavens Teacher corpse puppets were bestowed by the sect. The reason why they were bestowed with powerful corpses was very simple. It was because of their powerful talent. This was very normal. Any sect would bestow benefits to their talented disciples. However, Yen Nantian said that the corpse sect didn't bestow benefits, but poison. This was because the corpses bestowed by the corpse sect were the corpses of Heaven's teachers who had reached the end of their lives. Cultivation was a battle against the heavens. It often required a long period of accumulation in order to reach a higher realm. Many people didn't have that long of a lifespan. Ordinary people couldn't change this fate, but Heaven's teachers could, because a Heaven's teacher had cultivated a young spirit. When their lifespan was exhausted, their 3 souls could temporarily become young spirits and attach themselves to their corpses. These corpses were bestowed by the corpse sect to talented disciples. After a long period of cultivation, when these disciples reached the Heavens Teacher realm, the original Heavens Teacher's young spirit would appear and devour the 3 souls of these disciples, thereby avoiding the reincarnation cycle of the heavens and obtaining a new life. To put it bluntly, the corpse sect was the middleman of this body trade. Those Heavens Teachers exhausted their lives to cultivate. No one was willing to be unable to cultivate because their lifespan was insufficient. Because of the special nature of this trade, all the metaphysical sects, whether they were orthodox sects or heretical sects, almost all Heavens Teachers couldn't escape the temptation of lifespan. However, if someone wanted to exist, they couldn't do without the corpse sect's trade. Therefore, the Corpsine sect lived in seclusion in the Taihang Mountains. They constantly kidnapped people from the outside world and bought and sold corpses. No one ever investigated them. Even all the metaphysical sects kept the name Corpsine sect a secret and didn't even mention it. It was also this special nature that allowed the corpse sect to have abundant development over the years. Their strength was incomparably huge. However, most of the people in this sect were cultivation madmen. They had been hiding from the world to cultivate, so the outside world didn't know about them. Chapter 186. In a sense, the corpse cultivators of the Corpsine sect were the cauldrons chosen by the yang spirit of the celestial masters to allow them to reincarnate. Yen Nantian learned this secret when he became a celestial master. He was not chosen by the yang spirit of the celestial master from the beginning. He just refined an ordinary corpse and reached the celestial master realm at the age of 50 by relying on his own talent. Logically speaking, even if he became a celestial master, there was no need to worry about being possessed. However, talent did not equal strength. Some yang spirits of the celestial masters would make mistakes when choosing cauldrons. Some selected corpse cultivators were unable to reach the celestial master realm when they were old. At this time, the corpse puppets had to choose new cauldrons. This was also the reason why the disciples of the Corpsine sect had to refine the corpse puppets for the second time before becoming celestial masters. Using this sacrificial refining, the young spirits of the celestial masters who had chosen the wrong cauldrons would reselect the disciples who were about to enter the celestial master realm. Yen Nantian was reselected by the young spirit of the celestial master this time and became a cauldron. At first, he didn't know. He just felt that his corpse puppet seemed to have developed intelligence, and his cultivation speed suddenly increased. It could be said that he was advancing at a rapid pace towards the yang spirit realm. Later, when he officially broke through to the yang spirit realm, the yang spirit of the celestial master in the corpse puppet finally attacked him. At that time, his yang spirit realm was still unstable. When he was practicing the yang spirit realm, the corpse puppet suddenly attacked him. It destroyed his body and controlled his yang spirit to devour it. Yen Nantian was also good. Although it was the first time that his yang spirit had left his body after he officially became a yang spirit celestial master, under the pressure of the corpse puppet, he controlled his yang spirit and used all his magical powers to injure the corpse puppet and escape. After that, all the members of the corpse insect began to chase after his yang spirit. He hid here and there, and his yang spirit was injured several times. Finally, he escaped here and used a Taoist technique that he had learned by chance to absorb yang qi to barely keep his yang spirit from dissipating. The people of the corpse sect thought that his yang spirit had dissipated after being seriously injured. In addition, they couldn't find it anywhere, so they slowly forgot about it. It had been hiding here for about 10 years. He's very weak right now. If he hadn't met me, he wouldn't have had any chance to escape. He could only stay here and wait for death. After telling his story, Yen Nantian was extremely grateful to me and repeatedly thanked me. He even said that after he left this place, he would definitely bestow upon me a great fortune that would allow me to reach the heavens in a single step. I was curious. What kind of fortune could be described with such an exaggerated phrase as reaching the sky in a single bound? Unfortunately, after I asked him several times, Yen Nantian kept me guessing. Don't worry, you will know when the time comes. At this moment, I wasn't wary of Yen Nantian anymore. I suppressed my curiosity and asked him to sit with me. We started to chat. The facts proved that Yen Nantian was worthy of being a heavenly master. Although he came from the corpse sect, a typical evil sect, his knowledge of metaphysics was extremely profound. He was very clear about the details of cultivation. Moreover, he didn't skimp on his knowledge. As long as I had a question, he would explain it to me in detail. After a whole day, I felt that my basic theoretical knowledge had increased a lot. At this moment, I finally let go of my guard against him. I even felt grateful to him. On the path of cultivation, besides the knowledge I had obtained from the death scripture, I didn't have a teacher to guide me. I had to blindly explore my way. Not only was it hard, but I also felt guilty. Having someone who had once touched the heavenly master's power to teach me made me feel like I had never used anything before. The next day, not long after Yen Nantian and I discussed how to take him out, the old man guarding the soul-devouring cave came to open my door and told me that I could go back by myself. At this moment, Yen Nantian had temporarily taken possession of my magical compass. I used my Tao energy to transform into Yin energy to cover my body. Then I pretended to be in pain and hurriedly ran out of the soul-devouring cave. When I came out, I saw Wei Somping's corpse, which I had used to disguise as my corpse puppet, standing outside the soul-devouring cave. After I left, Tong Tong immediately asked him to follow me to the Black Zombie Hall. According to Wei Somping's memories, he lived in the Black Zombie Hall's D area, room 29 in the corpse sect. The places where the disciples of the corpse sect lived were divided into 3 areas: the white zombie cave, the black zombie cave, and the purple zombie cave. They corresponded to the disciples of the dragon-seeking, pressure point, and glory knowledge realms. Above them was the flying zombie cave, where the heavenly master of the corpse sect lived. Wei Sampeng had only heard of it and had never been there. He didn't even know where the flying zombie cave was. On the way to the black zombie cave, more and more corpse sect disciples appeared. I looked around and saw that most of them were in a hurry and didn't talk to each other. According to Wei Sampeng's memories, the entire corpse sect was like this. The cultivation atmosphere was very crazy, and there were no entertainment activities. It was also very difficult to become friends. What caused this crazy cultivation atmosphere was a series of rules and regulations in the corpse sect. According to the rules of the corpse sect, those who didn't reach the dragon-seeking realm before the age of 20, the pressure point realm before the age of 30, and the glory knowledge realm before the age of 40 could be refined into a corpse puppet when the sect lacked corpses. This bloody system was like a sword hanging above everyone's head, forcing them to cultivate crazily. Even so, there would always be some people who couldn't meet the requirements every year. Although not everyone who couldn't meet the requirements would be refined into corpse puppets, the corpse sect would still select a few people to carry out this policy. Moreover, all the disciples would be present at the ceremony so that they could learn from it. With the connivance of the mysterious world, the corpse sect didn't have to worry about the number of disciples. Once they lacked manpower, they would send out disciples to search for children with excellent root bones from all over the country. Every year, there were many cases of missing children in the country, and the shadow of the corpse sect could be found in most of them. It wasn't that no one thought of resisting and escaping, but the corpse sect was located in the depths of Taihang Mountain. The road was rugged, and very few people could escape by relying on their two legs. Secondly, after cultivating for a period of time, they would have to deal with corpses every day. These people gradually became isolated and even felt that they were incompatible with ordinary people. They simply couldn't integrate into the real world, so they slowly gave up on the idea of escaping back. Of course, the most important point was the supervision system of the corpse sect. Every living area, including the main roads along the way, had people guarding it day and night. The strength of these guards was at least at the glory knowledge realm. It was said that every living area also had people at the heavenly master level secretly guarding it. However, Wei Sampeng hadn't seen it with his own eyes, so he couldn't determine if it was true or not. After returning to the area of the black zombie cave, I saw two middle-aged men dressed in black sitting cross-legged on both sides of the road when I walked in. There was also a similarly black coffin placed horizontally on each side of them. There was a strong yin aura coming from the coffin. From the density of the yin aura, it was at least at the purple zombie level. These two people and two corpses were the guards of the black zombie cave. Normally, they just sat cross-legged and cultivated, as if they didn't care about anything. However, I knew that if I showed any intention of escaping, they would definitely stand up and kill me on the spot. Because of the corpse puppet and Yen Nanshan's young god, I was afraid of being seen through. However, this cultivation method isn't all bad. There are still some good aspects that surpass the orthodox cultivation methods of Taoism. Oh, I suddenly became interested and asked, for example? Yen Nantian touched the non-existent beard on his chin and smiled. Speaking of which, the essence of the corpse sex cultivation method lies in your current acupoint realm. I frowned and tried to recall the yin refining technique, but I couldn't remember anything about the acupoint sealing technique. I asked Yen Nantian to help me. Yen Nantian didn't directly tell me about the cultivation method. Instead, he pointed at the wall behind me and asked me to see what was on it. I turned my head, and saw that there was an area on the dark wall behind me that was filled with holes of different sizes. These holes were constantly emitting black gas. The Yin gas could turn into a visible mist. This meant that the density of the Yin energy had reached a terrifying level. I wasn't surprised that the corpse sect had thick Yin energy, but I didn't understand why Yen Nantian wanted me to see it. I turned my head to look at Yen Nantian. At this time, he smiled and continued to explain, the corpse sect's cultivation method is called the Yin refining technique. As the name implies, it is a method to refine Yin energy. The most important thing is to find high-quality Yin energy. As long as there is high-quality Yin energy to support it, the cultivation speed of the Yin refining technique is much faster than the orthodox Taoist sects. I roughly understood what he meant. I pointed at the holes on the wall behind me and asked, the Yin energy coming out of these holes is the so-called high-quality Yin energy? Yen Nantian nodded. Yin energy is divided into 4 grades: heaven, earth, black, and yellow. Among them, the lowest grade of yellow-ranked Yin Qi could only be produced in some natural Yin gathering grounds. As for the Yin Qi produced in those so-called desolate tombs, it could only be considered as the most ordinary Yin Qi that did not make the grade. As for the Yin energy in the corpse sect, as far as I know, there is an earth-grade Yin gathering ground in the flying zombie cave. The Yin energy in the black zombie cave is only the Yin energy from the earth-grade Yin gathering ground, so it can only be considered black grade. Of course, black grade Yin energy is also very rare. In the white zombie cave, there is only yellow grade Yin energy. The corpse sect relies on this Yin energy to allow their disciples to cultivate at such a fast speed, especially the sealing acupoint realm. You should know that the corpse sect has a requirement of 20 dragon seeking, 30 sealing acupoint, and 40 glorious knowledge. As long as one is talented, they can reach the dragon seeking and sealing acupoint realms in 10 years. However, the gap between sealing acupoint and glorious knowledge is huge. Although the black zombie cave only had mysterious Yin energy, I was satisfied with the speed of opening 1 aperture in half a year. So after understanding the technique, I immediately sat down next to the wall and began to cultivate. At this time, Yen Nantian pulled me and asked, "You won't be staying in the corpse sect for too long, right?" I nodded. After finding my parents' bodies, I would leave immediately. Otherwise, it would be hard to avoid unexpected events. When Yen Nantian saw me nod, he sighed and said, "The most important part of the Yellow Springs Ascension technique is opening one's aperture. Only after opening one's aperture will your realm be stabilized. If you don't continue to cultivate until you break through your acupoint and leave this place, your previous cultivation will be in vain unless you immediately find a place with excellent Yin Qi of high quality and continue your previous cultivation." I was discouraged. The mysterious Yin energy needed half a year to break through 1 aperture. It was impossible for me to stay here for half a year. What was the point of cultivating now? Seeing my disappointed face, Yen Nantian looked a little hesitant. However, he quickly opened his mouth again. The flying zombie cave has earth-level Yin energy. In less than 3 months, you can break through 1 aperture. Calculating the time, you should be able to stay for 3 months. I happen to know a way to find earth-level Yin energy. Do you want to give it a try? He knows a way to find earth-level Yin energy? This wasn't strange. After all, he used to be the celestial master here. It was normal for him to know some secrets. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end, I shook my head and sighed. I don't even know if I can stay for 3 months. Moreover, this matter involves the celestial master's cave, so it will be risky. After thinking about it carefully, I don't think it's worth the risk. Yen Nantian hesitated for a moment, but he quickly nodded. That's right. 3 months is too long. What if I can help you find heaven-level in energy so that you can break through one aperture in 9 days? What? I jumped up from the bed and asked Yen Nantian in disbelief, Are you serious? Heaven-level in energy? Chapter 188. Ascending a chakra from the 9 heavens is an irresistible temptation for any cultivator, and I am no exception. However, even though I was tempted, I still had some doubts. I frowned and asked Yen Nantian, Didn't you say that the highest level of Yin energy in the corpse sect is the earth-level Yin energy in the flying zombie cave? Where does this heaven-level Yin energy come from? Yen Nantian's expression became serious. After pondering for a while, he said, When I was still a heavenly master of the corpse sect, I heard some secrets about the corpse sect. It is said that the Yin energy in the flying zombie cave isn't the core area of the Yin gathering area. There is also heaven-level Yin energy in the deeper areas. After saying that, Yen Nantian shook his head with a wry smile and sighed. Of course, I only heard some rumors at that time. The corpse sect is too mysterious. Even though I was a heavenly master, I didn't know its true secrets. No one even knows who the sect master of the corpse sect is. This was strange. No one knew who the sect master of the corpse sect was. I doubtfully asked, If the sect master doesn't show up, how is the corpse sect managed? Yen Nantian said, The corpse sect is divided into 4 caves and 8 halls. Each area has its own cave master and hall master. Usually they manage the place. Each area is independent and doesn't interfere with each other. As for the cave master and hall master, they are directly appointed by the sect master. However, the sect master only gives them a piece of paper with his name on it. He doesn't show up. I was even more puzzled. How could the corpse sect survive for hundreds of years with such a loose and remote management? It was unbelievable. I asked suspiciously, Then, didn't the people below have any strange thoughts? Yen Nantian's smile became even more bitter. Of course, some people did. However, all of them died. The rest of them didn't have any other thoughts and didn't dare to have any. He spoke very calmly, but these calm words clearly contained some blood-stained past events. I nodded and didn't ask further. Instead, I changed the topic to the sky-grade Yin energy. You've only heard some rumors. How can you be sure that the sky-grade Yin energy exists? Yen Nantian's bitter expression disappeared. Although he still had a smile on his face, his expression became even more serious. A place like the corpse sect doesn't even have people to chat with. Since there are rumors spreading, I think they are most likely true. Furthermore, when I first heard this rumor, I secretly prepared a lot of things to get to the bottom of it. I just didn't think that before I could carry it out, something would happen to me. Then he looked at me with a burning gaze and asked, I've prepared a lot of things back then. They should still be here. Earlier, I told you that I was going to give you something good. It's the heavenly Yin energy. This has been my long-cherished wish for many years. If you're not afraid of danger, I can bring you along to investigate. I couldn't help but be tempted by this sudden invitation. As long as I can find heaven-grade Yin Qi, I might be able to advance to the glory of knowledge realm before I leave the corpse sect. However, if something happens, what will happen to my parents' corpses? After thinking for a moment, I asked Yen Nantian, How dangerous will it be? Yen Nantian shook his head. I've made a very precise plan. If everything goes according to my plan, there won't be any danger. However, this matter involves the flying zombie cave and even higher powers. Who can say for sure? I don't know how dangerous it will be. The older one is, the more timid they become. If this matter was a year ago, or even half a year ago, I would have accepted his invitation without hesitation. However, I didn't have the heart to do so now. After hearing his words, I finally shook my head and said, "Forget it. My priority right now is to find my parents' corpses and send them away. As for the rest, it can only be placed after this matter." Yen Nantian nodded and said, "It's good that you have a filial heart. However, what if we find your parents' corpses and send them away? Do you still want to come with me to find heaven-grade Inchi? After that, we will return to the corpse sect." Yen Nantian nodded again with a smile on his face. Previously, in order to find heaven-grade Inchi, one of the preparations I made was to secretly dig a tunnel that can go from the Inchi tunnel behind you to the entrance of the corpse sect. Although many years have passed, that tunnel is still very well hidden. I'm sure it's still there. Whether we want to leave or come back, it won't be too difficult. There's a secret tunnel. I was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't because I wanted to come back to find heaven-grade Inchi, but because if there was a secret tunnel, it would be much easier to take my parents' corpses away. After asking for a long time, I finally understood. In each cave of the corpse sect, there was a wall with a small hole like the one behind me. Behind this wall was a tunnel with Yin energy. It was just like a heating pipe in the mortal world. It connected all the places in the corpse sect together. According to Yen Nanshan's speculation, the heaven-grade Inchi should be in the deepest part of this tunnel. As long as we enter this tunnel and go deeper, we will eventually find the heaven-grade Inchi. As for the tunnel that led to the outside world, it was just an escape route that he had prepared. After discussing for a long time, the two of us roughly decided on this matter. There were still 4 days until the next time I would be on duty to deliver food to the caves. We would use these 4 days to find the secret tunnel that Yen Nantian had prepared. After confirming that the tunnel was intact, we would send my parents' corpses away. Chapter 189. Everything had been prepared, so all that was left was to find my parents' corpses. Early the next morning, Yen Nantian once again possessed Wei Somping's corpse and pretended to be my corpse puppet. He went out with me to the corpse sect's kitchen. Delivering food was something that every disciple of the corpse sect had to do since childhood. Wei Somping's memory of it was very clear. I walked to the kitchen as if I was familiar with it. There were already a dozen people who were on duty there. After eating in the kitchen master began to assign tasks to everyone. I took the initiative to apply for the corpse storage area. Then I pushed the cart that was prepared in the kitchen with a lot of food and rushed to the corpse storage area. My parents' corpses should be in the corpse storage area. I wasn't in a hurry to go there, so I first went to the other caves in the corpse storage area. The corpse sect's rules were very strict, so there was a set time to deliver food. If I was late, I would definitely be held responsible. In order to prevent any accidents, I delivered the food to the other caves before heading to the corpse storage area. There weren't many people on duty in the corpse storage warehouse. Usually, there were only 2 people like me who were at the same level as me, taking turns to be on duty. It shouldn't be too difficult to use the ancestral searching talisman to fool them temporarily. I originally had great confidence in my plan, but I didn't think that after entering the corpse storage area, I would see 3 people. Aside from the 2 pressure point realm people on duty, there was also one in the glory of knowledge realm. Moreover, I had seen this person before. He was the corpse storage area's Darren. Why was he here? My heart sank. Things had changed. I was afraid that today wouldn't be so smooth. Whether it was Tong Tong or we both had a lot of methods to deceive them. However, the glory of knowledge realm wasn't something the 2 of us could deal with. Holding the food in my hand, I walked over to the 2 pressure point realm people and asked softly, "What should I do?" The corpse puppet that Yen Nantian was residing in was right next to me. He naturally knew that I was talking to him. Very quickly, his voice rang in my head, and he said to me, "My young god power hasn't recovered yet, so I can't help you, but you can think of a way to lure the tiger away from the mountain and trick this glory of consciousness realm person out." I sighed helplessly. It seemed we could only do this. Unexpectedly, as soon as I went to put down the food, before I could come up with a good idea, Mr. Who suddenly called me. It seemed he wanted to ask me something. However, before he opened his mouth, he had the two people on duty leave, leaving me alone in the warehouse. I was a little anxious, but Mr. Who didn't seem to be in a bad mood. His cold face seemed to be wearing a smile. In the corpse insect, corpses were common consumables. Adding on the fact that I had only applied for ordinary corpses, no one asked me anything, and I was directly approved. Then I took the approval and went to the corpse warehouse to take out my parents' corpses. After taking the corpses, I had accomplished half of my goal. I hurried back to my cave residence and took my parents' corpses. Together with Yen Nantian, we entered the Yin energy passage through a small hole we had dug earlier. After entering the passage, the thick Yin energy in the passage formed a hurricane. Even at my realm, I felt extremely cold. Fortunately, it was only the Yin energy of the mysterious level, so I could endure it. Under Yen Nanshan's guidance, we quickly went to the secret passage he had mentioned. After walking through the rugged Yin energy passage for around half an hour, we arrived in front of a winding mountain wall. According to the direction of the passage, we were supposed to go southeast. However, Yen Nantian went to the stone wall in the northeast. He picked up a big rock from the ground and threw it at the stone wall. The stone wall, which looked normal, suddenly collapsed, revealing a new passage. Yen Nantian controlled the corpse puppet to enter the passage first. I carried my parents' corpses and followed him. The passage wasn't long, but there were many twists and turns. After walking for around 10 minutes, we finally reached the end of the passage. This end was different from the previous entrance. The exit wasn't on the stone wall in front of us. Yen Nantian pointed at a small circular hole above our heads. "The exit is over there." Then he controlled the corpse puppet's body to jump up to the side of the stone wall. He reached out his hand and poked the circular hole. Immediately, dazzling sunlight shone in. From the ground to the top of the hole, it was 3 or 4 meters high. However, to us, this height was nothing. After a few minutes, I took my parents' corpses and climbed out with Yen Nantian. After we got out, the surrounding terrain was very strange. I looked around for a long time, but I didn't know where we were. Yen Nantian told me that this was the foothills of Mount Taihang in the northeast. When I came here, I had come from the southwest foothills, but now I was in the northeast. Since the corpse sect would send people to check the situation of the cave dwellings, we didn't dare to linger. I hurried to find a safe place to hide my parents' corpses. Then, I used the Yin gathering talismans to set up a small Yin gathering formation to ensure that my parents' corpses wouldn't rot. Then, I followed Yen Nantian and returned to my cave dwelling in the corpse sect. Chapter 190. As we moved forward, the Yin energy in the air became colder. At first, I used my Tao energy to protect my body, so I could feel a trace of warmth. However, after walking for an hour, even my Tao energy couldn't keep me warm anymore. The cold Yin energy was like the coldest wind in winter. I couldn't help but shiver, and I could even feel the chill in my bones. At this moment, Yen Nantian, who was walking in front of me, turned around and told me, "We're in the flying zombie caves territory, and the Yin energy is everywhere. You should be careful." Then he noticed that I was shivering. He couldn't help but laugh. "I forgot that with your cultivation base, it's hard to resist the Yin energy here. However, you've practiced the Netherworld Ascension technique. As long as you use this technique, the Yin energy won't bother you anymore. The Netherworld Ascension technique has this kind of effect. I stopped and began to use the technique according to the Netherworld Ascension technique. Not long after that, I slowly absorbed the Yin energy in the surroundings. At first, the cold Yin energy seemed to become stronger. However, after my body adapted to the Yin energy, I didn't feel that cold anymore. We resumed our journey. Since we had entered the Flying Zombie Caves territory, the Heavenly Masters Caves of the Yin Corpse sect were only one wall away from the Yin energy passage. Although the chaotic energy created by the surging Yin energy could disturb the Heavenly Masters' senses, it was unlikely that they would notice our movements. However, to be careful, we slowed down a lot. We had to stop for every step we took. Fortunately, the Yin energy passage was very short. After walking for around half an hour, we reached the end of the Yin energy passage. Previously, the tunnel was very narrow, only allowing one person to pass through. However, at the end of the tunnel, it suddenly opened up. It was no longer a tunnel, but a huge stone chamber. The ceiling was at least 10 meters above the ground, and it looked very grand. In the stone chamber, there were all kinds of hanging stalactites, all kinds of jagged rocks, and there was even a water source that appeared out of nowhere, gurgling and flowing. The scenery was too beautiful to take in. However, facing such a beautiful scene, Yen Nantian and I wore a distressed expression. We came here to look for heaven-grade Yin Qi, but the stone room at the end of the tunnel is still filled with earth-grade Yin Qi. Was Yen Nantian's judgment wrong? I couldn't help but look at Yen Nantian. I wanted to ask him, but right at this moment, a shadow moved next to a pile of strange rocks not far from us. The thick Yin energy in the area fluctuated. Feng Shui masters were very sensitive to auras. I turned around to check. At the same time, I was vigilant. Yen Nantian noticed the commotion even faster than I did. His voice rang in my head. There's someone there. After being nourished by the earth-grade Yin Qi for a long time, it had formed this strange thing. After listening to his explanation, I understood what kind of existence a zombie was. However, I didn't know why he said we were lucky. After asking one more time, Yen Nantian stroked his beard and smiled. In the metaphysics world, there's a saying, ghost infant zombie and zombie infant zombie. The ghost infant zombie is the ghost infant zombie that you have with you, and the zombie infant zombie is this little zombie in front of us. These two things are legendary. Not many people have the chance to see them. According to the rumors, these two things are born with pure Yin bodies. Their cultivation speed is much faster than ordinary humans. The ghost infant zombie is also called the ghost girl. It's the best choice to refine a companion soul. I think you've refined it, right? Companion soul? I've heard of this term before. It's a method to refine an Yin soul and make it perish together with the body. I didn't want to talk about Tong, so I just nodded. Yen Nantian continued. And this zombie infant zombie is the best choice to refine into a corpse puppet. The reason why I said we're lucky is that you haven't refined the corpse I'm in into a corpse puppet yet. Now you should throw this corpse away and refine the zombie infant zombie into your corpse puppet. The zombie infant zombie is pure, just like the ghost girl. It has a pure heart, and it doesn't have any bottlenecks when it cultivates. As long as it has high-quality Yin energy to absorb, it won't take long before it reaches the Heavenly Master realm. At that time, if your ghost companion shadow also reaches the Heavenly Master realm, even an ordinary Heavenly Master won't be its match. Even if your innate talent isn't high enough to reach the Heavenly Master realm, no Heavenly Master will dare to look down on you. I was bewildered. This little zombie in front of me was an existence as magical as Tong Tong? If that's really the case, then Yen Nantian really wasn't lying. Our luck really is too good. Yen Nantian kept silent. He looked at the little zombie with greedy eyes for a long time. Then he sighed and turned to me. Although this infant zombie has intelligence, its 3 souls are still in a chaotic state. You need to use the spirit opening technique to help it open its spirit. Moreover, although it can absorb energy very fast, it doesn't practice cultivation techniques. It doesn't know how to use energy. After you refine it into a corpse puppet, you need to teach it how to fight. That way, it can help you fight against your enemies. You should remember that you shouldn't waste this precious treasure. Chapter 191. After pondering for a while, I gritted my teeth and forced a smile. Big brother, Yen, this corpse is so magical. How can I keep it for myself? Just like you said, I already have a ghost child. Big brother Yen, you should keep this corpse. Yen Nantian smiled bitterly and said calmly, I only have the young spirit body now. It's still a long way off for me to recover my physical body. What's more, I've already refined a corpse puppet, although I have a way to refine another corpse puppet after I reconstruct my physical body. I don't know how long that will take. You should accept this corpse demon. It's one of the rewards for saving me. To be honest, I was a little touched. Although I had temporarily trusted Yen Nantian, after experiencing so much betrayal and hatred, I was still wary. After my parents died, besides Tong Tong and the Red Shadow, I wouldn't be able to trust anyone else in this world. At this moment, Yen Nantian made me feel warm again. I kept silent for a while, then nodded. All right, big brother Yen, I'll keep it. This time, whether it's to find the heaven-level energy or to help you reconstruct your body, I'll help you to the end. Yen Nantian didn't stand on ceremony and said confidently, That's great. All right, we shouldn't stay here for too long. Let's continue to look for the heaven-level energy. Oh, right, the corpse in front of us has too many limitations. Although this corpse is magical, it's still a corpse. I can also possess it. Moreover, it hasn't gained intelligence yet, so it won't resist when I possess it. It'll be much easier to take it away. What do you think? He had given me the corpse puppet. Now that he wanted to possess it, I didn't have anything to say. I nodded and agreed. Yen Nantian smiled and asked the corpse puppet to sit down. Then he got out of Wei Somping's body and attached himself to the corpse puppet. Just as he had said, the corpse puppet looked confused and didn't resist at all. After Yen Nantian possessed it, he controlled its body to stand up. He smiled at me and said, All right, let's continue to search. After saying that, he walked out from behind the strange rock and went straight to the innermost wall of the stone room. He stopped and examined it. I suppressed the distracting thoughts in my mind and followed him. When I was far away, I didn't notice anything strange about the wall. But now that I was closer, I could see the difference. This wall was very wide, just like the wall in Wei Somping's cave residence that absorbed yin qi. It was full of holes of various sizes, but the difference was that this hole was not hollow. Instead, it was filled with things that looked like plant roots. Moreover, these plant roots were intertwined with each other. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't even be able to see the holes in the back. Yen Nantian's eyes lit up. He raised his small hand and touched the stem. He frowned and asked, Do you feel that there seems to be a large amount of yin qi coming out of this stem? I was bewildered. I closed my eyes to sense, but I didn't feel anything too strong. I shook my head. Yen Nantian reached out and touched the root again. He smiled and said, After all, you cultivate Dao Qi. Your sensitivity to yin qi is still slightly lacking. Anyway, This corpse ghost that I'm currently possessing has a pure sound body. It's very sensitive to yin qi. It shouldn't be wrong. Look at the bottom of this stem. It's extending from the holes in the wall. Is this wall the same as the cultivation wall in the cave residence? If it's true, the yin energy behind this wall should be the heavenly level. I was also excited. I nodded and agreed with him. It's possible. We should dig a hole in this wall. We'll see if the heavenly leveling energy is behind it or not. Then, the two of us started to move. To be exact, I started to move alone. Although Yen Nantian could use some yin energy after possessing the corpse ghost, this wall had been nourished by yin energy for years. It had a strong resistance to yin energy. I had to use my Dao Qi to try. I still chose to dig a hole like before. I used my Dao Qi to slowly scrape the sand and stones off the wall. However, after trying for a long time, I felt desperate. This wall was really hard. Although my Dao Qi had some effect, I had only reached the acupoint ceiling realm. With my ability, I could only scrape a little bit of dust off the wall. At this speed, I guessed I would have to work for dozens of years before I could dig a hole. Of course, using Qi of the Way to forcefully dig was the least efficient method. Whether it was using talismans or hand seals, the same Qi of the Way could play a greater role. It was not completely impossible to dig a hole in this stone wall. However, if I did that, I wouldn't be able to control my Dao Qi. The people of the corpse sect might notice something. In the end, Yen Nantian brought up an idea. There were a few relatively large holes in the roots. As long as we dug out the roots and exposed the holes, we would be able to crawl into them. We followed his suggestion and searched around for a long time. Eventually, we found a hole in the middle of the wall that was big enough for one person to get through. Since the wall was more than 10 meters high, the hole was about 7 or 8 meters from the ground. We couldn't reach it by standing on the ground. After thinking for a long time, we couldn't think of a good idea. In the end, we decided to use the stupidest method. After several hours, we gathered a lot of stones and piled them on the ground. We piled them up to 6 or 7 meters high. Then we used our Dao Qi and yin energy to dig out the roots in the hole. The rhizome could be considered tough, but compared to the stone wall, it was much more fragile. In less than half an hour, we had completely cleared out the rhizome. There was only a big, dark hole in the wall that was directly revealed to us. While we were digging, I found that the stone wall was very deep. It was several meters deep, and we couldn't see what was inside from the outside. However, after sensing for a while, I could feel the thick yin energy. It seemed to be much thicker than the yin energy on the other side of the wall. Yen Nantian nodded affirmatively. It's heaven-level yin energy. If it was purely absorption, we could have started from our current positions. However, since we had already reached this step, it wouldn't make sense for us to just go and take a look. Yen Nantian and I discussed it and quickly came to an agreement. However, it wasn't good to rush over there. Who knew what was on the other side of the wall? We had to find a way first. Unfortunately, the thicker the yin energy was, the bigger the commotion would be if we used our Taoist techniques. I couldn't use my Taoist techniques, so I had to use the stupidest method. I picked up some stones and threw them at the wall to see if there were any movements on the other side. The situation was ideal. There was only the sound of stones falling to the ground and nothing else. We waited for a long time, but nothing happened. Only then did the two of us relax. Yen Nantian took the lead, and I followed behind him. We went through the hole and headed to the other side of the stone wall. Yen Nantian's ghost corpse was small and thin, so it wasn't a problem for us to get through the hole. We smoothly disappeared. Then I tried my best to get through the hole. It took me a lot of effort to get through the hole. However, when I was halfway there, Yen Nantion suddenly stopped. I urged him a few times, and he moved again. His body disappeared. I guessed he had jumped to the other side of the wall. I continued to move for 1 or 2 meters until I reached the other side of the stone wall. When I reached the other side and was about to jump, I lifted my head and was dumbstruck. This is a huge karst cave, and there are countless small holes all around it. We came in from one of them. In the center of the cave, there was an incomparably huge male corpse floating in the air. In comparison, I was only the size of the corpse's finger. There were many purplish-green plants growing on the corpse's body. These plants were constantly wriggling, and as they wriggled, the huge corpse's body visibly shrank. However, it quickly returned to normal. This cycle repeated itself, and coldine energy was quickly emitted from the plants. What is this? Chapter 192. What is this? As soon as I asked this question, Yen Nantion jumped down and muttered, "The Heavenly Tao's corpse. This is the Heavenly Tao's corpse. The Heavenly Tao's corpse? The Heavenly Tao is just an illusory concept. It doesn't have a physical form. How could there be a corpse?" Because of the giant corpse, I was stunned for a long time. Then I jumped down from the hole in the wall and went to Yen Nantion's side. After I stood on the ground, the corpse floating in the air looked even bigger. I didn't dare to speak loudly, and just whispered to Yen Nantion, "Big brother, Yen, what is this Heavenly Tao's corpse?" Yen Nantion didn't seem to hear me. His eyes didn't even blink as he stared at the corpse. His body seemed to be shivering as he muttered, "I knew you wouldn't lie to me. You wouldn't lie to me." After a while, he suddenly turned his head. The disdain and disappointment in his eyes had completely disappeared, and he had regained his previous warm and even flattering expression. He chuckled and said, "I don't know what this is either, but according to ancient records, this is the Tao essence of chaos, the corpse of the Heavenly Tao. No wonder there is heaven-grade yin qi. I'm afraid that only the corpse of the Heavenly Tao can produce heaven-grade yin qi in this world." I didn't understand what he said, but looking at the giant corpse and the purple-green vine, I couldn't help but sigh with admiration. The corpse sect's terrifying power was this Heavenly Tao's corpse and the vine. It was obvious that this Heavenly Tao's corpse was the source of all the heavenly yin energy in this area. It was possible that this giant corpse was imprisoned here by the corpse sect to provide heavenly yin energy to the sect. After a moment of dazzlement, I ran my fingers through my hair and put this thought aside. I frowned and asked Yen Nantion, "Big brother Yen, did you already know that this thing existed here?" He didn't deny it and nodded with a smile. "I've heard people tell me this before, but I didn't believe it. Now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I know that it's true. Let's not talk about this. We've finally found the heavenly yin energy. Little brother, you should focus on cultivating the Yellow Springs Ascension technique for the next few days. If there's anything you don't understand, you should ask me now. I won't be able to take care of you for the next few days." "Can't take care of me?" I hurriedly asked. "Does brother Yen have something to do these few days?" Yen Nantion nodded. He stared at the huge corpse and said, "I need to think of a way to take something from this corpse." I nodded. I wanted to find the heaven-level yin energy to practice the Netherworld Ascension technique, so I didn't doubt it. However, what did Yen Nantion want to take from this corpse? After asking, he smiled and told me that he wanted a drop of blood from the corpse. He also said that it was the heavenly blood. When I heard this name, my heart trembled. My soul and spiritual sense inexplicably felt a kind of reverence. I opened my mouth to ask, but I couldn't say anything. At this moment, Yen Nantion had already turned around and walked towards the foot of the huge corpse. I took a deep breath and calmed my mind. I didn't want to think about anything else. I sat cross-legged and began to absorb the yin energy around me. As I immersed myself in cultivation, the outside world didn't bother me anymore. I didn't know how long it had been, but the yin energy around me slowly entered my body through my pores. It turned into wisps of yin energy that passed through my meridians and gathered in my acupuncture points. My heaven meridian originally had 4 acupoints of Tao Qi. After a period of cultivation, the 5th acupoint had about a quarter of Tao Qi. After the heaven level yin Qi entered the meridians, it finally gathered in the 5th acupoint of the heaven meridian. It didn't take long for the Tao Qi in the 5th acupoint to turn into yin Qi. From this moment on, all the yin energy in my 5th acupuncture point had turned into a vortex that emitted a cold yin energy. As it spun, the tip of the vortex turned into a sharp yin needle, which fiercely stabbed the barrier of my 6th acupuncture point. The cold pain enveloped my entire body in just a blink of an eye. However, in the midst of this pain, the needle easily pierced a small hole in my 6th acupuncture point. Right after that, the yin needle changed its direction and started to stab somewhere else. At this moment, I finally understood why the Netherworld Ascension technique had such a miraculous effect on breaking through the barrier of the acupuncture points. The Tao energy was gentle and wouldn't harm the human body. However, because it was too gentle, it was hard to stimulate it and make it proactively break through the acupuncture points. Yin Qi, on the other hand, was different. Yin Qi itself was very sharp. That was why it was said to be bone-chilling. Once it reached the acupoints, the yin Qi would be like needles piercing into the acupoints from the very beginning. Although it would cause pain and harm the body, it was the best way to open the acupoints. The yin energy in my heaven meridian's 5th acupuncture point was extremely pure. After condensing into yin needles, their sharpness was even more terrifying. That was why the barrier of my acupuncture points couldn't stop the yin needles. That was why a hole had appeared in my acupuncture points in just a blink of an eye. Even more terrifyingly, the amount of yin energy in my heaven meridian's 5th acupoint is less than 1/3 of the acupoint's capacity. As the yin energy accumulates, the size of the yin needles will increase. Naturally, the holes they make in the acupoint's walls will also become bigger. At this speed, I guessed that when the amount of yin energy in the acupuncture point reached 1/3 of the acupuncture point's capacity, the 6th acupuncture point's barrier would be completely broken. The facts confirmed my guess. After a few hours, the 6th acupuncture point's barrier was filled with countless small holes. When the yin needles pierced through it one last time, the acupuncture point's barrier collapsed. The yin needles carried a fierce aura and rushed into the 6th acupuncture point. The acupuncture point's barrier was broken. I had officially reached the 6th aperture realm. Feeling excited, I opened my eyes and looked around. However, I didn't see Yin Nantian. I guessed he was still trying to find the heavenly path's blood. I didn't mind it. I closed my eyes and continued to absorb yin energy to break through the next acupuncture point. Time was of the essence, and this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Any delay would be a waste of time. As time passed, the cold yin energy shrouding my body became thicker. The number of acupuncture points in my heavenly meridians increased from 5 to 6, 7, and 8. Not long after the 8th acupuncture point was opened, Yin Nantian's voice came from next to me. Only then did I wake up from my cultivation. Just as I was about to open my eyes, I noticed that there was a thick layer of frost on my eyelashes. As I opened my eyes, the frost tore apart, giving off a rustling sound. When I opened my eyes, Yin Nantian was standing in front of me. He seemed to be injured. His face was haggard, and his aura was much weaker. Without waiting for me to ask, Yen Nantian asked, "Has your realm increased?" Originally, in the eyes of a heavenly master cultivator, with my cultivation base, he could see through me. However, he was currently residing in a zombie's body, so he didn't have that ability. I smiled and nodded. "It's around 3 apertures. Yen Nanshan's eyes widened, and he said in disbelief, "But it's only been 9 days. His words stunned me. There was no sense of time in the mountains, and there was no sense of time when I cultivated. I didn't know how much time had passed. I thought that according to what Yen Nantian had said, it would take more than 20 days for me to open 3 chakras. I didn't expect that it had only been 9 days. After his shock, Yen Nantian suddenly thought of something and quickly asked, "When you entered the pressure point realm, how many meridians did you open?" After hearing his question, I instantly understood what the problem was. Everyone's aptitudes were different. No matter what cultivation method, there would be a difference in talent. Yen Nanshan's 9 apertures, and 1 aperture was probably based on the talent of a normal meridian earth master. I had 3 meridians and 5 apertures. Naturally, the speed at which I absorbed Yin energy was 3 times faster than a normal meridian earth master. Chapter 193. Soon, Yen Nantian changed the topic. With a bitter face, he told me about his progress. "It's going well for you, but it's hard for me. The giant corpse's skin is really tough. No matter how hard I try, I can't cut it to get blood." I was a little skeptical. How tough can the body be? "Big brother Yen, you can control the Yin energy of the ghoul. You can use Yin energy to pierce the giant corpse's skin. It shouldn't be difficult, right?" Yen Nantian nodded, but his expression still did not improve. He said, "Using your Dao Qi or the Yin Qi of the corpse demon, you can indeed pierce through the giant corpse's body. However, according to my speculation, if you let this power enter its body, the giant corpse might wake up. At that time, it will be troublesome." Wake up. I was even more skeptical. I told you that this is the heavenly Tao's corpse. It's a corpse. How could it wake up? Yen Nantian smiled when he heard my question. "Ordinary corpses can turn into zombies. Of course, the heavenly Tao's corpse can wake up. Moreover, this corpse isn't that corpse. The heavenly Tao's corpse isn't just a simple corpse." His words didn't make sense. However, after he stopped talking, I didn't want to know more. I followed him to the giant corpse's feet. After trying for a while, I found that it was just as he said. The giant corpse's skin was really tough. Ordinary energy couldn't pierce it. Eventually, Yen Nantian reluctantly told me I should continue to cultivate. If we can't get the heavenly Tao's blood, we can use Tao energy or Yin energy to pierce the giant corpse's skin when we leave. Then we can get a drop of blood and leave this place. It didn't matter if the giant corpse woke up or not. As long as we could escape, it would have nothing to do with us. What he said made sense. The heavenly Tao's corpse had been sleeping for many years. If it suddenly woke up, it wouldn't be able to stop us. The chance of us escaping was still big. As for the corpse insect, after seeing that the giant corpse had changed, they wouldn't be able to find the cause for the time being. They needed to stabilize the heavenly Tao's corpse. That way, escaping wouldn't be a problem. After thinking it through, I nodded and agreed with Yen Nanshan's suggestion. I continued to cultivate, crazily. 5 days later, the barrier of the 9th acupoint in my heaven meridians was broken by the Yin Qi. I had officially entered the 9 apertures realm. Originally, I wanted to break through the last aperture in one go. This way, as long as I go out and completely stabilize my realm, the next step would be to consider breaking through to Glory of Knowledge realm. Unfortunately, no matter how hard I tried, the Yin energy couldn't form a vortex in the ninth acupoint to attack the last acupoint. After trying many times, I gradually understood. Although the Netherworld Ascension art could help me break through the apertures very quickly, it had a limit. Breaking through 4 apertures was the limit. If I wanted to break through more apertures, I would have to absorb enough Taoist qi, fire qi, and yin qi to fill all the apertures I had broken before. The heaven meridian flowed vertically within the body. The insight acupoints above the heaven meridian flowed from bottom to top. Additionally, every insight acupoint was connected. The insight acupoints below were the foundation. If the foundation was not stable, the insight acupoints above could not be opened. No matter how miraculous the Netherworld Ascension art was, it couldn't break this rule. After understanding this, I didn't have time to regret. I directly opened my eyes and left the cultivation realm. I told Yen Nantian about the situation and told him to prepare to take the Heavenly Path's blood at any time. Yen Nantian felt sorry for me for a while. Then, with a cautious expression, he started to arrange the next steps. After cultivating for a few days, I guessed that he had already thought of all the steps. He directly told me, although the Heavenly Path's corpse has an enormous amount of yin qi, in reality, the Heavenly Path is chaos. There is no yin or yang. So, it's better to use your Taoist qi. When the time comes, we'll strike at the gap between the giant's left foot. After you pierce the skin, turn around immediately and leave through the hole in the wall. After I collect a drop of blood, I'll follow behind you and escape as fast as I can. The plan is very simple, but no one can be sure of the specifics. We can only speculate. So, when the time comes, we can't hesitate. When we run, we have to run as fast as we can. You understand? I nodded. Yen Nanshan's plan was really simple, but with the current situation, it was the most suitable choice. After discussing, we didn't hesitate anymore. We cleaned the hole in the wall again to ensure that it wouldn't affect our escape. Then, we walked to the giant corpse's foot. Yen Nantian chose a spot in the giant corpse's left foot. Then I formed a needle of Taoist qi at the tip of my finger and pierced that spot. The giant corpse's tough body made it easy for the Taoist qi to pierce through. However, just as I had guessed, the Taoist qi successfully pierced through and formed a small hole. Right at that moment, Yen Nantian shouted at me, "Run!" I had already prepared for this. I quickly retrieved the Taoist qi and turned around to run. I used my fastest speed to reach the hole in the wall and prepared to enter it. At this moment, an earth-shattering roar resounded from behind me, causing sand and stones to fly everywhere in the enormous stone room. My head felt dizzy, and I unconsciously let go of my hands that were climbing, causing my body to fall from the rock wall. I felt cold sweat dripping down my back. Yen Nanshan's guess was right. The giant corpse had woken up. I bit my tongue and didn't have the courage to turn around.